I don't think you belong here anymore, Jessie." Marlene's voice was soft, almost sweet, but every word hit me like an ice pick. I stood frozen on the porch of my own childhood home, staring into the flawless face of my dad's new wife, who was calmly telling me I had no place in the house my mother once made warm. "My name is Jessie." And right then, I felt like nothing. Marlene's manicured fingers gently brushed invisible dust from her designer dress as she spoke, each gesture making it painfully clear she saw me as just another speck to sweep away. "This is your father's birthday," she continued, her smile perfectly poised but her eyes cold. "It'd be best for everyone if you kept your distance tonight. Family only, you know? Family only." The words tore through me. I looked past Marlene, past her perfect posture and glittering jewelry, toward the living room window where I used to watch Mom laughing, where I'd celebrated countless birthdays and holidays, memories Marlene was steadily erasing one luxurious upgrade at a time. "I am family," I finally whispered, but my voice cracked, betraying me. She tilted her head, pity mixing with disdain on her porcelain features. "Jessie, family contributes. Family fits in. Maybe it's time you accepted you've outgrown this house. Your father's happier now, isn't that what matters?" I wanted to scream, to shake her perfectly composed shoulders, to make her feel even a fraction of the humiliation boiling inside me. But I stood still, hands trembling, too proud to let her see she'd won. My mother had taught me better than this. Even gone, she reminded me who I was supposed to be. She'd never raised her voice. Her power had always come from quiet dignity, from strength disguised as grace. In that moment, standing helpless before Marlene, I knew I had to find mine. I backed away, turned, and walked down the steps, each one heavier than the last. My feet felt numb as I reached the sidewalk, my heart hammering with shame. The reality was stark. I'd been officially shoved aside, locked out of my own life by a woman whose charm masked an agenda that ran deeper than petty jealousy. But Marlene underestimated one critical thing. I wasn't just the daughter she found inconvenient. I was also a brilliant financial analyst, with an eye trained to uncover secrets hidden beneath charm and glittering facades. Something about her perfectly rehearsed smiles, the calculated way she isolated me from Dad, even from my sister Tammy, hinted at something sinister. I wasn't just being cast aside, I was being systematically erased. And that realization ignited something fierce and unstoppable within me. If Marlene thought she could silently steal my mother's legacy, twist my father's loyalty, and casually toss me out like yesterday's trash, she had no idea what was coming. Before I share my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you've ever overcome something for your family. Trust me, you have no idea what they'll do once they find out the truth. Growing up, I was the kid who did everything right, but somehow never got noticed. Maybe you felt that, like you're invisible, no matter how brightly you shine. I learned early on that my victories weren't the kind that earned applause. I wasn't the star athlete like my sister Tammy, or the charming troublemaker like my brother Vane. No, I was the quiet achiever, the honor roll kid who preferred calculators to pep rallies. In school, while Tammy collected trophies for gymnastics and Vane earned cheers for his charismatic speeches, my triumphs lived quietly in report cards and math competitions. Mom noticed. She always did, but Dad, well, he rarely looked past the trophies lined up on the mantel. One particular day stands out vividly. I was 16 and had just won a citywide academic scholarship, a huge deal, something I'd worked months for, sacrificing weekends and parties, buried under textbooks and study notes. Proudly clutching the award certificate, I rushed home, convinced this time would be different. The house was buzzing with excitement. Dad had set up a barbecue in honor of Tammy qualifying for state finals. The yard was crowded with friends, family, and neighbors celebrating her achievement. I weaved through the throng, gripping my certificate tightly, heart pounding with anticipation. "Dad, I did it," I said breathlessly, pushing the paper toward him. He glanced down briefly, distracted. "Great, Jess. Hey, did you see Tammy's trophy? Look at this thing." My chest tightened. He didn't even read it. It was like being slapped, the kind of sting that lingers. But Mom caught my eye, her gentle smile reassuring me that she saw my effort. She reached out quietly, squeezing my shoulder with a pride that didn't need words. That was my reality, a cycle that repeated itself endlessly, me chasing approval that always felt just beyond reach, visible only to the one person who truly mattered, Mom. Years later, when Mom got sick, everything shifted. Suddenly, my invisible role took on new weight. I was the one managing doctor appointments, decoding medical bills, quietly handling the responsibilities everyone else avoided. Tammy and Wayne visited, of course. They brought flowers and laughter, but the moment Mom's pain overwhelmed the room, they'd vanish, leaving me alone with the heavy silence of her illness. When Mom passed, grief settled over us like fog. Dad withdrew, slipping away emotionally, leaving a space quickly filled by Marlene's confident charm. It wasn't long before Marlene had everyone wrapped around her finger. Dad laughed again, Tammy bonded over designer fashion tips, Wayne was charmed by her connections. And me? Well, Marlene quickly recognized the easiest way to solidify her place was to push out anyone who remembered a life before. Invisible again, but this time it felt worse. This wasn't about trophies or academic honors. This was about family, my mother's legacy, my own history slowly being erased. But what they didn't see, what no one ever saw, was that every overlooked accomplishment had quietly forged me into someone capable of more than they imagined. While they celebrated shallow victories, I'd quietly turned myself into a force capable of uncovering secrets others didn't even suspect existed. Marlene didn't realize it yet, but in her quest to isolate me, she'd unknowingly set the stage for my biggest triumph yet. She thought she'd made me invisible, but all she'd done was sharpen my vision. You know that moment when everything clicks into place and you realize you're stronger than anyone, especially you, ever imagined? Mine came quietly, on a cold Tuesday morning. It wasn't dramatic at first glance, just another day in the sleek, glassy financial district where I'd spent years building my career. But underneath that routine morning, something massive shifted inside me. After Mom passed, I'd buried myself in work to escape the hollow feeling at home. Maybe you've done that too, poured yourself into something just to drown out the hurt. Long hours turned into expertise, promotions, and then suddenly I was handling million-dollar deals, deciphering complex financial schemes, and quietly climbing ranks nobody noticed until I was at the very top. Then came the aha moment. It was during an audit for one of my firm's wealthy clients, a suspiciously charming woman named Eloise, who reminded me disturbingly of Marlene. As I unraveled Eloise's financial maze, shell corporations, hidden accounts, subtle manipulations, a chill ran through me. This was Marlene's world, a shiny surface hiding layers of deceit. Was Marlene doing this too? I couldn't shake the thought. Late nights became early mornings, fueled by determination and caffeine. I scoured every financial document I could legally access that related to Dad, Marlene, and our family estate. Piece by piece a pattern emerged. Money carefully shifted here, funds mysteriously allocated there. On paper it looked legitimate. Investments, improvements, new businesses, but beneath that, it felt disturbingly like Eloise's playbook. Marlene was subtly isolating Dad financially and emotionally, systematically erasing my mother's memory from our home and our lives. I felt sick, but also empowered. For the first time in my life, I had something no one else in my family had: the knowledge and skills to expose what was happening right under their noses. But exposing Marlene wasn't going to be enough. Not for someone who'd been sidelined all her life. No, I needed more. Quietly, methodically, I started building my own empire. I took everything I'd learned, financial acumen, market savvy, and unyielding determination, and transformed it into something powerful. I created a private investment fund, small at first, just a whisper in the noisy world of finance, growing steadily beneath everyone's radar. This was more than personal wealth, it was independence, a tool strong enough to shield my family from whatever storm Marlene was brewing. Maybe you've felt this way too. The intense satisfaction of doing something extraordinary without anyone knowing. It wasn't about recognition this time. It was about power, about having leverage when it mattered most. It was about finally standing in a position to protect everything Mom built, everything Dad had unknowingly let slip away. Months passed quietly, but inside I was restless. The stronger my hidden empire became, the more urgently I needed to act. It was time to reclaim my rightful place, but not for revenge alone. Though honestly, I won't lie, the thought was delicious. No, This was about justice, protection, and dignity. It was about confronting the woman who thought she'd buried me, and instead showing her just how deeply she'd underestimated me. So, when Dad's birthday invitation, the one Marlene had uninvited me from, finally arrived, dread mixed with excitement. Marlene's smug dismissal was the spark I'd been waiting for. She thought she'd erased me, silenced me, made me invisible. But she was about to learn what it meant to cross someone who had nothing left to lose, and everything to. The day of Dad's birthday finally arrived. You ever had one of those mornings where every cell in your body knows something huge is about to happen, even though you can't pinpoint exactly what? My stomach twisted in knots. The clock moved painfully slow as I sat at my desk, glancing repeatedly at the elegant invitation I'd placed beside my laptop. Ironic proof of the party I wasn't supposed to attend. But I was going anyway, not because I wanted drama, not even purely to spite Marlene, but because this was a turning point. I had to face them all, show them I wasn't someone they could just push aside or forget. Maybe you know that feeling, needing closure so badly that you're willing to walk right into the lion's den to get. After work, I went home and changed into a simple black dress. Nothing flashy, I wasn't trying to compete with Marlene's glamorous outfits, but it fit perfectly, a quiet symbol of the confidence I was finally ready to embrace. My heart raced as I drove toward my childhood home, anxiety twisting around every breath. Pulling up, the familiar house now felt like enemy territory. Cars lined the driveway, laughter echoed from inside, lights glowing warmly through windows I once gazed out of with Mom. Standing on the sidewalk, I almost turned around and left. What if Dad rejected me outright? What if Marlene humiliated me again in front of everyone this time? But a deeper voice, Mom's voice, steady and calm, echoed softly in my memory. Never let fear decide who you are, Jessie. Taking a deep breath, I walked forward and opened the front door. Instantly, the hum of conversation faltered. Heads turned toward me, expressions ranging from shock to discomfort. Tammy's eyes widened in alarm. Wayne shifted nervously, but Marlene, she looked like she'd expected this moment all along. Her perfectly painted lips curled into a faint, condescending smile. "Jessie, I didn't expect you to actually show up," she purred smoothly. Her tone carried that subtle venom designed to sting without ever openly attacking. "It's my dad's birthday," I said simply, refusing to back down. "Is it?" She raised an eyebrow. "Funny, I thought it was clear this was a celebration for family." Behind her, Dad stood silent, uncertain, his eyes meeting mine briefly before sliding away. My stomach twisted again, sharper this time. Marlene had him completely under her spell, my own father, uncomfortable in my presence. But that pain hardened quickly into determination. I wasn't here for his approval. I was here to stand up to her. Still I stayed calm, speaking quietly yet firmly. "I am family. No matter how many times you try to erase me, that won't change." Around us, guests shifted awkwardly, whispers dancing through the room like breeze through grass. Marlene's expression tightened briefly, irritation flashing before she recovered her composure, laughter tinkling softly from her lips. "Oh, Jessie, drama doesn't suit you," she said dismissively, turning back to the crowd, effortlessly regaining control of the room. "Let's not spoil the night." I felt humiliation rise hotly to my cheeks, but I forced it down. There was a bigger battle coming. I could sense it building beneath Marlene's facade. This wasn't the moment to fight, not yet, but I wouldn't leave defeated. Not this time. Instead, I quietly moved through the party, accepting curious glances and whispered comments. I was an outsider now, undeniably. But beneath that discomfort, I felt something powerful stirring. Certainty. Marlene had made a critical mistake tonight. She'd let me see exactly how much power she thought she held, how deeply she'd already sunk her claws into everyone I loved. I left the party early, slipping out unnoticed, knowing this was just the beginning. Tomorrow I had an enormous financial deal to finalize, one that could completely change the power balance in my life. It was my secret weapon, one Marlene couldn't even dream existed. She'd taken her best shot tonight, thinking she'd humiliated me enough to stay away forever. But all she'd really done was guarantee I'd come back stronger, wiser, and more dangerous than ever. She had no idea just how ready I was to face her judgment, and make her regret every cruel word she'd ever spoken. Walking back into that house the next evening felt surreal. like stepping into a battle I'd trained for my whole life. But unlike last night, I wasn't here to suffer quietly. Tonight, something was different, something Marlene couldn't anticipate. I carried an invisible shield, built from years of silent humiliation and quiet victories that nobody else noticed. But tonight, everyone would. From the moment I stepped inside, the air felt heavy. Whispers and sidelong glances followed my every move. Vane gave me a stiff, awkward hug, murmuring vaguely, "Good to see you, Jess," as if he barely remembered who I was. Tammy avoided eye contact altogether, busying herself with the hors d'oeuvres table, as though arranging miniature sandwiches required all her focus. But it was Marlene who truly orchestrated my gauntlet of contempt. She floated across the room in her glittering evening gown, smiling brightly to the guests before turning that practiced, poisonous sweetness toward me. "Oh, Jessie," she cooed dramatically, "2 nights in a row, this must be a record." Her voice drew immediate attention. Nearby conversations quieted, guests subtly leaning in, sensing something brewing. I held my ground, smiling calmly back. "I thought Dad deserved another visit." She tilted her head slightly, her smile sharpening. "How sweet. I wasn't sure you still had time for family, what with your career." Her tone dripped disdain, as if the job that gave me independence was somehow shameful. "I always make time," I replied steadily, "even when family doesn't always remember to invite me." A ripple of tension moved through the crowd. Marlene's smile wavered, quickly replaced by a calculated look of injured innocence. "Jessie, you're always welcome. You never seem to fit in." The jab landed perfectly, slicing into every past insecurity I'd ever felt. But this time, instead of retreating, I leaned in. "Interesting that the only person who feels that way is you." Marlene's eyes narrowed slightly, but her smile returned colder this time. "Oh, I think you'll find I speak for everyone." She glanced around theatrically, prompting nervous, awkward nods. "You have a habit of making people uncomfortable, dear. You know, the way your mother used to, with her little martyr act." The mention of Mom nearly knocked me off balance. Marlene had deliberately struck my most vulnerable nerve right in front of everyone. Rage surged inside me, but I refused to let it show. Instead, I stood taller, meeting her eyes directly. "Funny, I thought it was my mother who made this place feel like home," I said softly but firmly, "before you redecorated it into something unrecognizable." The murmurs around us deepened. Marlene's composure slipped again, this time visibly. Her jaw tightened, eyes flickering briefly with genuine anger before masking it quickly. "Careful, Jessie," she whispered harshly, barely audible. "You're dangerously close to embarrassing yourself again." Before I could reply, Dad stepped between us, uneasy, attempting to smooth things over. "Now, come on, ladies. Let's not ruin a good evening." But his weak attempt only deepened my frustration. He was standing between us, physically, yet emotionally, he'd already chosen Marlene's side. I saw clearly the extent of his betrayal, not just toward me but toward the woman who'd loved him until her very last breath. I stepped back slightly, heart pounding but dignity intact. The gauntlet of contempt Marlene had carefully set up tonight hadn't crushed me. Instead, it had crystallized something important. I couldn't rely on Dad or my siblings to stand with me. If there was justice to be found, I had to be the one to deliver it. As Marlene drifted away victoriously, I glanced toward the hallway mirror, catching my reflection. Stronger now, resilient. Marlene thought tonight was her final humiliation of me, her masterpiece of social isolation. But she had no idea I'd come prepared, armed with more than courage. The phone in my pocket buzzed quietly, confirmation of the deal I'd been waiting on, the weapon she'd never seen coming. Tonight's humiliation would be her last victory. Tomorrow she'd understand just how costly it had been to underestimate me. I stood near the edge of the crowded living room, catching my breath, trying to steady my heartbeat. If you've ever faced down an enemy disguised as family, you'll know the weight of each glance, every whispered word. The humiliation Marlene had so carefully choreographed wasn't finished yet. I could sense it, in the icy stillness that settled over the guests. Suddenly, the chatter faded completely, leaving a silence so thick it was painful. Marlene stood beside Dad at the center of the room, gently tapping her wineglass with a perfectly polished fingernail. "Attention, everyone," she announced sweetly, her voice dripping honey. "We're so thrilled to celebrate Tom tonight. But before we cut the cake, I have something important to share." My heart clenched. Instinctively, I knew whatever was coming would hurt more deeply than anything before. She glanced directly at me, eyes glinting, lips curving in malicious triumph. As you all know, our family has seen changes these past years. We've overcome losses, faced challenges, and built something wonderful together. Marlene paused, perfectly timed for drama, her eyes sparkling theatrically. But every family reaches a point where tough choices must be made. And tonight, sadly, we need to make one. My stomach churned violently as her gaze never left mine. Jessie, darling, she continued, voice cold now beneath the sweetness, it pains me deeply, but we've decided it's best if you no longer consider yourself part of this family. Gasps echoed through the room. My siblings looked stunned. Dad's face turned pale, but he said nothing. My world spun, humiliation burning hot beneath my skin. She'd just publicly disowned me, right there, in front of everyone I'd ever known. Marlene, don't, Tammy whispered weakly, but her voice was drowned out by murmurs and shocked reactions. Marlene raised a hand, commanding attention once more. It's not personal, Jessie, it's about preserving unity, values, standards, things you've struggled to embrace. She smiled sympathetically, eyes sharp with barely concealed satisfaction. We wish you nothing but happiness elsewhere. Elsewhere. The word pierced deep. I looked desperately toward Dad, silently begging him to speak up, but his eyes were fixed firmly on the floor. His betrayal sliced through me like a knife. You have no right, I whispered hoarsely, voice shaking. Every humiliation I'd ever endured seemed small compared to this moment. This was the ultimate rejection, a cruel verdict delivered before everyone, meant to erase me entirely. Oh, sweetheart, Marlene replied smoothly, her tone pitying and poisonous. We both know this was inevitable. After all, you never really belonged here. My breath caught painfully, and for a moment I felt genuinely shattered. Tears blurred my vision, humiliation coiling sharply in my chest, but as I stood there, something else ignited within me, fierce and unstoppable. Anger. Pure, white-hot anger. This humiliation wasn't my breaking point. It was Marlene's biggest mistake. She'd gone too far, and finally, I had the clarity I needed. My grief solidified into determination. If Marlene wanted war, she'd just declared it in front of everyone. And she had no idea how ready I was. Straightening my spine, I met her eyes with a strength she'd never seen from me before. You've underestimated me for the last time, I said clearly, voice ringing with conviction. She smirked dismissively, turning her attention away, believing the battle already won. But beneath my calm surface, the plans I'd carefully prepared were already in motion. Tonight was her night of victory, but tomorrow belonged to me. I walked quietly toward the door, each step deliberate, dignified, powerful. Eyes followed me, whispers trailing behind. But I no longer cared about their opinions. Marlene had tried to erase me from my own family, but in her arrogance, she'd awakened something formidable. Pausing at the door, I turned back once more, looking directly at my father. Happy birthday, Dad, I said softly, letting the words hang heavily in the silence. His eyes lifted briefly, filled with shame, regret, or maybe just cowardice. Whatever it was too late now. He'd chosen Marlene's comfort over his daughter's dignity. Stepping out into the cool night air, humiliation finally gave way entirely to purpose. Marlene had declared me officially erased, publicly disowned, humiliated beyond repair, but she didn't understand yet that she'd given me exactly what I needed most. Freedom. Freedom to fight back. Freedom to win. My phone buzzed insistently just as I reached my car, still shaking from Marlene's ruthless dismissal. I nearly ignored it. After all, who would call me at my lowest moment? But something tugged at me, an instinctive sense that I needed to answer. Hello? I managed, voice cracking, still raw from humiliation. A clear, professional voice filled my ear. Jessie? It's Mark Simmons from the law firm. I apologize for the late call, but I have news. My heart quickened. Mark represented the trust established by my mother before her death. Funds that had always felt symbolic. A quiet reminder of Mom's legacy. Is something wrong? Actually, he paused, the silence thickening with suspense. Quite the opposite. Jessie, I reviewed your recent financial actions, your investments. I thought you'd want to know that as of tonight, your personal fund has officially eclipsed all projections. You've just crossed $25 million in personal assets. I froze, stunned. $25 million. The reality slammed into me with dizzying force. Everything I'd quietly built, hidden from view, was suddenly real, tangible power nobody in that house imagined I possessed. "You did it, Jessie," Mark continued warmly, genuine admiration in his tone. "I've never seen anything quite like it. Your mother would have been incredibly proud." His words broke something deep inside me, healing wounds I thought untouchable. Mom would have been proud, not just of the money but of the strength behind it, the quiet defiance, the resilience. All those years of invisibility had finally forged something powerful enough to rewrite the narrative entirely. I thanked Mark and hung up, standing alone beneath the street lamp's soft glow. For a long moment I simply breathed, absorbing the enormity of this revelation. Marlene had publicly humiliated and disowned me, believing she'd destroyed my standing. But right here in my hands was undeniable proof of my worth. My victory. Turning back toward the house, determination surged through me with astonishing clarity. Marlene thought tonight marked my ending. Instead, it was my rebirth. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was powerful. And I wasn't leaving until everyone inside knew exactly who they'd underestimated. I marched back up the driveway, heart pounding, every step charged with purpose. The front door swung open easily, as if inviting me to reclaim everything Marlene had tried to strip away. The guests looked startled by my return, murmurs rippling through the room once again. Marlene stood near the fireplace, laughing confidently, unaware her smug triumph was about to crumble beneath her feet. "Jessie, you're persistent," she sneered, turning toward me with exaggerated patience. "But I think we've said all." "Actually," I interrupted clearly, authority resonating through every word, "I have something to say." The room fell silent, tension thickening instantly. Marlene's composure flickered with irritation. "Jessie, you've made it clear that I don't belong," I continued calmly, confidently, each word measured, powerful. "But here's something you don't know, Marlene. You're the one who doesn't belong." She laughed dismissively, clearly believing I had nothing substantial. What a dramatic accusation. Ignoring her mockery, I addressed Dad directly, ensuring my voice carried clearly to every ear in the room. "Dad, I know what Marlene has done with your finances, with Mom's estate, slowly siphoning resources, isolating everyone who might question her actions. But what she didn't count on is that someone in this family would actually pay attention." Marlene's face drained of color, eyes widening with shock. For the first time she looked genuinely afraid. "What is she talking about, Marlene?" Dad's voice shook, confused and anxious. I stepped closer, unyielding. "She's been manipulating everything. Accounts, investments, even your relationships. She made sure to isolate and erase anyone who posed a threat. And I can prove it, because unlike her, I built my success honestly, without destroying family." The silence that followed was deafening. Marlene opened her mouth, searching desperately for a lie that might save her. But her carefully crafted mask had shattered completely. The crowd stared at me, no longer whispering in judgment but in awe. The tables had flipped spectacularly, the power shifting visibly from Marlene's manicured fingers directly into mine. "You underestimated me, Marlene," I said quietly, savoring every word. "Tonight you humiliated me publicly, but you forgot something critical. The truth always comes out." She looked broken, speechless, and in that breathtaking moment of vindication, I felt something shift deeply within me. Dignity restored, justice reclaimed. This was no longer merely revenge, it was redemption. Marlene had tried to erase my existence. Instead, she'd sealed her own fate, paving the way for my triumphant return. The room pulsed with stunned silence as everyone turned toward Marlene, waiting for her response. She stood frozen, her practiced composure now crumbling visibly. Her gaze darted from face to face, seeking allies. But everyone had already begun stepping back, distancing themselves, leaving her standing alone in the spotlight of her own deceit. Dad looked as though he'd been slapped awake from a long sleep, confusion and hurt battling across his features. He took a hesitant step toward Marlene, his voice breaking as he asked weakly, "Is it true, Marlene? Have you been stealing from me?" "Stealing?" she stammered, trying desperately to regain her polished control. "Tom, this is ridiculous. Jessie's clearly upset, she's fabricating this." But her denial sounded thin and desperate now. Not the confident manipulation of moments ago. Her perfect facade fractured, revealing the raw panic underneath. She glanced around the room frantically, pleading silently for anyone to intervene on her behalf. Nobody moved, Nobody spoke. They all just watched, transfixed. I took a step closer, my voice clear and steady. You've played everyone in this room, Marlene. Manipulated our family, tried to erase my mother's legacy. But your biggest mistake was thinking you could erase me. I've uncovered everything, the records, the transfers, the hidden accounts. It's over. Her jaw tightened, eyes blazing briefly with defiant fury before finally surrendering to defeat. Jessie, please. I held up a hand sharply, cutting off her desperate plea. No. You're done twisting the truth. I gave you chances. I stayed quiet, hoping you'd stop, but tonight, you showed your true colors. Now everyone sees exactly who you are. Slowly, painfully, Dad sank into a nearby chair, shoulders slumped, eyes hollow with realization. Tammy moved cautiously toward him, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder, her expression ashamed and apologetic when her eyes met mine. Vane remained silent, stunned into immobility, realizing how deeply he'd allowed himself to be fooled. And Marlene? She stood there, utterly alone, eyes filling with tears, born not of remorse, but of fear. Her beautiful mask was gone forever. I trusted you, Dad whispered brokenly, shaking his head, disbelief washing over him like a tidal wave. I believed every word you said. Marlene's eyes darted desperately toward me, pleading now, desperate. Jessie, please, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, I replied, calm but resolute. You thought kindness was weakness, loyalty was foolishness. But you underestimated one crucial thing. My strength. My mother's strength. With nowhere else to turn, Marlene suddenly burst out, voice edged in frantic anger. None of you appreciated me. I brought this family back to life. I deserve better than this. A shocked gasp rippled through the crowd. Dad stared at her in horror, finally seeing her true nature without the gloss of charm and beauty she'd used as camouflage for so long. You deserve exactly what you're getting now. Truth, I said quietly but firmly, allowing no sympathy to soften my voice. You stole from us, emotionally, financially, personally, and you nearly succeeded. But it's over, Marlene. You can't manipulate us anymore. Her shoulders sank in surrender, tears finally breaking free, makeup streaking dramatically down her flawless cheeks. She'd tried to destroy me with humiliation, but her downfall was infinitely more public, more humiliating, more perfect in its justice. Turning my back on her sobbing form, I stepped closer to Dad, kneeling to meet his gaze. His eyes shimmered with regret, sorrow, and something deeper, shame at having let himself be deceived so thoroughly. I'm sorry, Jessie, he whispered hoarsely. I was so blind, I lost everything that mattered. I shook my head gently, compassion finally softening the hardness that had shielded me all night. Not everything. But you have to see it now, Dad. You have to recognize what's truly valuable before you lose it forever. He nodded slowly, tears filling his eyes, finally seeing clearly who had stood by him all along. I see you, Jessie. I'm so sorry I ever forgot. Something heavy and painful lifted from my heart as I stood, feeling a new strength, free of the bitterness I'd carried for so long. Around me the room buzzed softly with quiet conversations, whispers of admiration and surprise. The tables had turned fully. I'd reclaimed the dignity Marlene had tried so hard to destroy. Stepping toward the door, I glanced back one last time. Marlene stood silent, broken, abandoned by those she'd deceived, left to face the harsh reality of her actions. Justice had finally been served. Outside, beneath the gentle glow of street lamps, I felt a sense of calm settle around me, deeper than any I'd known in years. Marlene had shattered our family, but tonight I'd started to piece it back together, stronger than ever. You know how sometimes family isn't about blood at all? It's about who stands beside you when everything falls apart? After Marlene's downfall, I discovered exactly what that meant. As I left that painful evening behind, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't news or revelations, it was genuine love. My best friend Claire had texted simply, "We're waiting. You're not alone." I drove straight to her place, a cozy apartment filled with mismatched furniture and warmth, a stark contrast to Marlene's perfectly staged world. Claire opened the door and immediately pulled me into a fierce, protective hug, whispering fiercely, "You did it, Jessie. You stood your ground." Inside, the people who'd quietly become my real family gathered, friends, colleagues who'd seen the quiet battles I'd fought, the strength I'd built beneath the invisibility. These were the ones who'd celebrated my smallest victories, who'd encouraged me when I faltered, who had always made space for me, even when my biological family hadn't. That night, we talked, laughed, cried together, sharing stories and comfort in equal measure. Their voices replaced Marlene's cutting words, their kindness filled the gaps left by my family's betrayal. With every hug, every genuine smile, I felt the bitterness drain away, replaced by something more powerful: gratitude. The next morning I woke feeling lighter, clearer. Dad's birthday party had been the night my old world shattered, but here, in the gentle comfort of friends who chose me without hesitation, I understood what I'd truly gained. In the days following Marlene's exposure, Tammy and Vane both reached out. Their apologies were cautious, hesitant, as if they feared I'd reject them outright, and honestly, part of me wanted to. But I remembered Mom's quiet strength, her ability to forgive without sacrificing dignity. I met them separately, first Tammy, then Vane. Each conversation was painful, raw, but also necessary. Tammy broke down completely, sobbing genuine remorse and confusion. "I'm so sorry, Jess," she whispered. "I let her twist everything, and I lost sight of what mattered." Vane, usually charming and confident, seemed humbled, deeply ashamed of how easily he'd accepted Marlene's version of reality. "You deserved better," he admitted. "I failed you." Hearing their apologies was healing. Forgiving them wasn't easy, but it was necessary, not for them, but for me. It meant finally letting go of resentment, freeing myself to move forward without bitterness clouding my path. Dad called last, his voice trembling with grief and regret. "Jessie, I can't undo what I've done, but I want you to know how sorry I am. Marlene was my greatest mistake, and losing you would be my greatest regret." I listened carefully, my heart aching but clear. "Dad, you hurt me deeply. You chose Marlene's lies over your own daughter. I'm willing to rebuild, but it will take time, honesty, and respect, nothing less." His agreement came immediately, humbled and sincere. Something inside me softened at that. The recognition that despite everything, I still mattered deeply to him. Maybe our family wouldn't ever be perfect, but maybe it could heal into something new, stronger, authentic. But the real family, the one I'd chosen and who'd chosen me, became my sanctuary. Claire and the others offered unwavering support, never wavering in their fierce loyalty. The difference between them and the family I'd grown up in was staggering. Here, there was acceptance without conditions, love without judgment. Here, I finally belonged. We celebrated each other's milestones openly: promotions, birthdays, everyday victories. Unlike my past experiences, these celebrations weren't shadowed by comparisons or competition. They were genuine expressions of happiness for each other's success. Maybe you've felt this too. The moment you realize family isn't defined by birth, but by those who stand beside you willingly, selflessly. It's powerful, freeing, and deeply healing. So despite all the pain Marlene caused, despite all I'd lost, what I gained was infinitely greater. I'd finally learned to value myself enough to demand respect, enough to walk away from toxicity, and enough to embrace the love freely given by those who truly saw me. In choosing me, they'd taught me how to choose myself. After everything that had unfolded, I knew one truth more clearly than ever. Boundaries weren't just necessary, they were essential for survival. If you've ever been hurt deeply, betrayed by people who should have protected you, you'll understand how vital it becomes to draw those lines sharply. Marlene's exposure led to her swift exit, not just from our lives, but from Dad's home and our family entirely. She'd vanished almost overnight, leaving behind nothing but bitter memories and tangled finances. Dad's remorse ran deep, and while I knew forgiveness was important, trust would take much longer to rebuild. But the real work, the quiet, powerful healing, was internal. I realized I'd spent my life craving acceptance from people who barely saw me. No more. I'd survived humiliation, betrayal, and isolation, but in return I'd found strength and clarity I'd never imagined possible. Now it was time to protect what I'd gained. My first step was creating clear, unshakable boundaries. Maybe you've had to do something similar, telling people you love that certain lines can't be crossed again. It's difficult, awkward sometimes, but crucial. I sat down individually with Dad, Tammy, and Vane, outlining what was acceptable and what wasn't. The conversations weren't easy, each held its own quiet tension, but afterward the relief was immense. Dad, humbled and deeply sorry, agreed without hesitation. "Whatever you need, Jessie, I'll earn back your trust if it takes the rest of my life." Tammy, her voice still heavy with guilt, promised immediate support. "I'll never let anyone come between us again," she whispered fiercely, holding my hand tightly. Vane nodded quietly, respecting the strength it took to assert myself. "You set the rules, Jess. We follow." Yet boundaries weren't only for family, they extended into every part of my life. Professionally, I'd learned the power of decisive action. My career soared as I refused to allow distractions or doubts to erode my confidence. Deals once out of reach became routine victories, reinforcing my self-belief daily. Marlene, in her twisted attempt to destroy me, had inadvertently shown me how powerful I could become. Each boundary I established was a fortress, protecting me from manipulation, insecurity, and the harmful expectations I'd carried since childhood. I no longer lived seeking approval. I lived for authenticity and dignity. Meanwhile, the consequences for Marlene were swift and undeniable. Dad filed legal action, revealing the full scope of her financial manipulation. The community, once charmed by her polished exterior, recoiled sharply at the ugly truth beneath. Her glamorous social world crumbled around her. A painful lesson in karma's quiet inevitability. I felt no joy in her downfall, only quiet satisfaction in justice finally served. In setting boundaries, I realized something profound. Revenge wasn't what mattered. True power wasn't punishing Marlene, it was protecting myself, healing the wounds she'd opened. Revenge had once felt satisfying, but now something even better filled that space. Peace. My chosen family, Claire and the circle of real, genuine allies around me, celebrated every boundary I established, proud to see me standing firm. They recognized what it meant to fight for yourself, and their unwavering support made my growth even sweeter. Sometimes healing means quietly stepping away from battles that no longer serve you, choosing peace over bitterness, strength over retaliation. Marlene had thrived on conflict, drama, and manipulation, but I thrived on something stronger: self-respect. Looking back, I understood clearly that Marlene had underestimated everything about me: my quiet resilience, my hidden strength, and above all, my ability to rise above her cruelty. She'd thought she controlled the narrative, but in truth, she'd merely set the stage for me to reclaim my own story. The fortress of boundaries I'd built wasn't about isolation. It was freedom, protection, empowerment. It allowed me to finally step forward into a future that was entirely mine, clear of toxic shadows from the past. Maybe you've experienced this too, the profound peace of finally letting go of revenge, embracing instead the quiet power of boundaries, dignity, and self-respect. If you have, you know it changes everything. From here, there was only one direction left to go. Forward. Into the powerful clarity of a life lived authentically, unshakably true to myself. In the months following Marlene's collapse, my success became more than personal. It became purposeful. If you've ever experienced betrayal or hardship, you know how easy it is to get stuck in anger, replaying the hurt over and over. But choosing something better, using pain as fuel to create meaningful change, is infinitely more powerful. I decided that the best revenge wasn't destroying Marlene or anyone else who'd wronged me. Instead, it was transforming my quiet financial empire into something bigger, brighter, and undeniably impactful. Using my resources, I launched a charitable foundation in my mother's name, the Eleanor Legacy Fund. It was dedicated to empowering women who'd experienced manipulation or emotional isolation, providing financial education, mentorship, and support. The fund quickly gained momentum, attracting attention from influential backers who valued authenticity and compassion over appearances and superficial charm. Every meeting, every new alliance forged for the foundation felt like reclaiming a piece of Mom's legacy from Marlene's shadowy grip. The more I grew this new vision, the more meaningful my past struggles became. Pain transformed into purpose. Betrayal reshaped itself into opportunity. At one fundraising gala, standing on stage before a packed room, I shared my story publicly for the first time, not to shame Marlene further, but to uplift others who'd faced similar situations. My voice trembled slightly, emotions raw, honest. "This isn't just about what happened to me," I said clearly, making eye contact with the captivated audience. "It's about every woman who's ever been dismissed, manipulated, or erased. It's about reclaiming dignity, rediscovering strength, and rebuilding your story on your own terms." The applause was thunderous, affirming something deep and powerful within me. This wasn't revenge, it was redemption, justice served through hope, healing, and resilience. It was proof that pain could birth beauty, that struggle could lead to strength. Tammy and Wayne became involved, volunteering their own talents, Tammy organizing community events, Wayne using his charisma for public outreach. Dad quietly offered support, humbled but proud, eager to show genuine commitment. Our family, once fractured and manipulated, now rebuilt itself around something real, honest, and meaningful. Meanwhile, Marlene faded completely from our lives, left behind by a community no longer charmed by appearances alone. Occasionally I'd hear whispers of her struggles, her inability to regain footing socially or financially, but instead of satisfaction, I felt only quiet acceptance. She'd faced consequences, but that was her journey now, not mine. My path led me somewhere brighter, creating legacy, purpose, and impact beyond family approval or public acclaim. It led me toward becoming someone my mother would have recognized instantly, not just her quiet daughter overshadowed by louder personalities, but a woman of strength, purpose, and authenticity. The foundation grew steadily, transforming countless lives, offering hope and guidance to those who felt invisible or lost. Each success story reinforced the profound lesson I'd learned. True power wasn't in dominating others, it was in lifting them up. Maybe you understand what it feels like to reclaim your own narrative after being silenced or overshadowed. It's transformative, healing, empowering. It allows you to finally stand firmly in your own worth, guided by your own truth. As I watched the Eleanor Legacy Fund flourish, I saw clearly the future that lay ahead, filled with opportunities not for revenge, but for genuine growth, real change, and lasting impact. I understood completely that Marlene hadn't destroyed my mother's legacy. She'd inadvertently ensured its strength and survival by forcing me to defend and redefine it. I now saw my struggle clearly, not as something that had weakened me, but as the forge where I'd become strong. Each hardship I'd endured, each humiliation, each betrayal, had shaped me into someone uniquely capable of understanding, compassion, and authentic leadership. And that was a legacy worth celebrating. It's strange how clearly you see yourself after everything else falls away. After all the humiliation, betrayal, and triumphs, I found myself in a quiet moment of reflection, fully understanding the woman I'd become. Maybe you've experienced it too, the peace that settles after the storm, a calm clarity revealing who you truly are. For so long, I'd measured my worth by external validation, Dad's approval, Marlene's manipulative acceptance, my siblings' recognition. I'd chased their approval desperately, never realizing it was a race I couldn't win, because the prize had always been within me. Standing now in the quiet comfort of my new office, a space entirely mine, filled with sunlight and purpose, I finally understood the simple truth Mom had always known. True validation comes only from within. It doesn't depend on trophies, applause, or acceptance from others. It thrives on self-respect, resilience, and authenticity. Maybe the most powerful victory wasn't defeating Marlene or restoring my family's dignity. Maybe the real victory was discovering my own worth, independent of others' opinions, free from the shadows of past humiliations. Dad visited often now, his regret still deep, but his pride in me growing clearer each day. Tammy and Wayne rebuilt trust carefully, respectfully. My friendships, the chosen family I'd built, flourished brightly, more genuine and supportive than ever. But through it all, one relationship deepened profoundly: my relationship with myself. I learned to trust my own judgment, embrace my own power, and stand confidently in the authenticity I'd quietly nurtured. Success, I discovered, wasn't something others defined for me, it was something I defined for myself. This realization brought profound peace, one that filled my days with a quiet, steady joy I'd never experienced before. Each morning felt like waking into a future that was fully mine, defined by my dreams, strengths, and values. Each night brought restful certainty, knowing I'd remain true to myself. But the greatest gift was the freedom of finally releasing the pain of the past. Marlene's cruelty no longer held power over me. Dad's betrayal no longer defined me. I was free to build a future, free of resentment or regret, guided only by clarity, compassion, and self-respect. Maybe you felt this too. The moment when you realize your struggles, no matter how painful, ultimately lead you toward your greatest strength. It's transformative, powerful, and deeply liberating. Now, standing strong in my own validation, I envisioned clearly what lay ahead. A life rich with meaning, driven by purpose, shaped by authenticity. My mother's legacy thrived, not just in the fund I'd established, but in every quiet act of strength, compassion, and dignity I embraced daily. And perhaps that was the most profound lesson of all. That true peace isn't found in external victories, but in the quiet certainty of knowing exactly who you are and refusing to compromise it for anyone. So, wherever you are on your own journey, know this. No one else defines your worth or dictates your story. You alone hold the power to reclaim your dignity, rewrite your narrative, and choose exactly who you want to be. I know because I've lived it. And if my journey resonates with you, let me know in the comments. Have you ever faced down betrayal or humiliation and emerged stronger, clearer, and more empowered? Share your experiences, and if this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear that it's okay, necessary even, to define success on your own terms. Because the truth is, your greatest victory lies within your own self-validation. Embrace it boldly. You deserve nothing less.